The skullduggery of the devil. Historians are the supplanters of truth. The victor gets to tell the story. Once a historian or scientist develops a theory, they are locked into proving it right. Any deviation or debunking of their theory shames, discredits, and dooms any future endeavors, i.e., research grants, speaking fees, etc. It is this reason why so many scientists and historians continue to sit on their hands and zip their lips about inaccurate things we now consider common knowledge today. Small example. Although the history books continue to tell us the Romans invented the aqueduct system, all historians now attest their aboriginal Etruscan neighbors, who were very dark-skinned, had the technology centuries before the Romans. Another not-so-small example, historians in America continually write how the forefathers of this nation were Christians and America was meant to be a Christian nation. Now that even the most taboo information is fair capitalist gain, the true thoughts of the founders of America are coming forward, and it isn't what you were deceived to perceive and believe. No, I'm not even talking about what most conspiracy information gets right and is truly common knowledge among anyone who wants to know. I'm talking about the cult behind the cult. Question, gentle strangers. Don't you find it strange some of the leading men in American history were Freemasons, and then there was others that opposed them? Yet they were all bonded by a certain brotherhood. Not everyone is a bonesman, yet their core beliefs are in line with every other wicked denomination. Heck, all the kings of the earth are not Christian, Muslim, or atheist, yet they belong to the same not-so-secret organizations. An even better observation, gentle strangers. Don't you find it strange the elite find nothing wrong with professing to be a Christian, yet align themselves with every form of foulness without finding a conflict of interest? If you show wisdom and not make up your mind before the matter is finished, I hope to show you the answers to all of these questions. I will start off with the standard uncovered information and heat up after that. Quote, "No, I ought not, for I should contradict all the histories of the great events of the Revolution. Let the world admire the supposed wisdom and valor of our great men. I shall not undeceive future generations." This was written by Charles Thompson, Congressional Secretary 1774 through 1779, and the man responsible for the seal of the United States when continually pressed about his meticulous notes taken during his tenure of the birth of this nation. He later burned them upon his death. The truth be told, the founders of this nation were openly Gnostic at the least and founded America for the rich. You don't believe me? All right, check this out. For the rich. Wealthy land and plantation owners took 4 months away from their families and friends, got high as hell and drunk all day, and came up with a way to protect their interests, their holdings, from the king. Little known fact, hemp/marijuana was the main industry in colonial times. I'll say that again. Hemp/marijuana was the main industry in colonial times. The entire plant was used to make rope, clothes, and of course, getting stoned. Historians will attest to the fact that Ben Franklin was the leader in hemp production, having traveled the world for different strains to plant for America. The water supply at the time was very unsanitary, so ale and whiskey was the drink of the day. It was never intended for the common man to have a say in government affairs. For this reason, property qualifications were enacted so only large landowners could vote. Next is the provision for the electoral college, ensuring the common man does not actually decide who becomes president. Their thought process was that only the elite would have land in their respective states, so only the elite would decide on the presidency. It was a buffer against the soon-to-be disgruntled common man. Heck, did you know the Senate was not an electable position until 20 years later? How many poor people have you seen make it to Congress or the Senate today? Is it a coincidence the majority of their manifesto, which is the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, are geared towards property rights? America was never envisioned as a land of milk and honey for the common man, whether they be white, black, Muslim, or Hindu. America was founded for the enlightened elite, plain and simple. Gnostic at the least. The majority of them were Masons who worship Lucifer and the sacred feminine, which is chick worship. For this reason, you have the Statue of Liberty in the New York Harbor, the goddess of reasoning atop of just about every national building and rotundas, gigantic penises like the Washington Monument across the globe, church steeples, compass and squares, arches and church windows, etc. Their beliefs are steeped in the ancient Egyptian and Babylonian dogma where the earth was birthed by the Great Mother, Gaia worship, so women's vaginas are very sacred to them. There are entire temples in India to this day that are dedicated to sacred sex. The founders were called enlightened ones, and though everyone talks about how they worship Lucifer, they totally are deceived and not perceiving the worship of the goddess of reason. She is the whore of Babylon that goes by many names, which all the kings of the earth are committing fornication with. Well, will be when they get a hold to the rest of the, and change the Middle East as we know it. I did a video on that. The Middle East is about to change, people. And reasoning and reason is about to come back. Babylon, B-A-B-A-L-O-N, is about to go back to her home base. But let's continue. According to Wikipedia under Cult of Reason, quote, the Cult of Reason was a belief system established in France and intended as a replacement for Christianity during the French Revolution. Under philosophy, the Cult of Reason was explicitly anthropocentric. Its goal was the perfection of mankind through the attainment of truth and liberty, and its guiding principles to this goal was the exercise of the human faculty of reason. In the manner of conventional religion, it encourages acts of congregational worship and devotion displayed to the ideal of reason. Example. This is the reason the French Masons gave America the Statue of Liberty. This is the reason why you see Masons continue to go to church. George Washington was famous for walking out just before the communion was being offered. He wasn't there for that type of spiritual feeding. Wasn't Thomas Jefferson and Ben Franklin diplomats in France? And wasn't the French Revolution honored with being the underpinnings to the birth of America? In fact, everyone I just mentioned has letter after letter to friends and family describing their beliefs, and believe me, they hated the Christians and the Bible. In fact, caveat, in fact, they spoke a hell of a lot better for the Muslims than Bible-believing Christians. Believe it, you got to believe that, or look it up for yourself. It's right there. It's in their own works, in their own writings. But let's continue. Thomas Paine called the Bible blasphemous, while Franklin summed up the life of the Messiah as just a fable. Thomas Paine made this perfectly clear in his book entitled Age of Reasoning, where practical and scientific reasoning superseded biblical prophecies or miracles. They basically believe if it can't be reasoned out with the mind, it cannot be true. Thomas Jefferson went as far as to rewrite the Bible, the Jefferson Bible, in which he omitted everything that referred to the supernatural or miracle event. He did get one thing right in my humble opinion. He believed the Apostle Paul was the first corrupter of the Christian faith. Their beliefs, just like those in France and England, were that mankind's reasoning was to become the law, based on self-morals. That is where we see we hold these truths to be self-evident comes from. Surely you don't think slave or indentured servant owners were really worried about human equality, do you? They were not second-class citizens in English, remember? Ben Franklin took it a step further by being a member of the infamous Hellcat Club in England. I got that from Time magazine. It is common knowledge this club held sacred sex orgies and basically raised hell. This club has been reported to have had human and animal sacrifices, and just recently, human bones have been discovered under the home Ben Franklin resided in England. But wait! To further the affliction, we have had more than a couple of Unitarian presidents also. What's so special and unique and different about Unitarians, you ask? Well, according to Wikipedia, under Unitarian Universalism. Y'all ready for this? Quote, it is a liberal religion characterized by a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. Unitarians do not share a creed, but are unified by their shared search for spiritual growth. From these traditions come a deep regard for intellectual freedom and inclusive love, so that currently individual congregations and members actively seek inspiration in and derive spiritual practices from all major religions. The theology of individual Unitarian Universalists ranges widely, including humanism, we are gods, atheism, there isn't a God, agnosticism, faithless/disbelief in God, pantheism, the universe is God/many gods, deism, God is reason, Christianity, the Son is God, Judaism, plain and straight mystics, neo-paganism, pagan gods, Hinduism, many sex gods, Hinduism, inner God, and many more. Current concepts about deities, however, are diverse among UUs. While some are still monotheistic, often from a Judeo-Christian perspective, many profess atheism or agnosticism. UUs see no contradiction in open atheists or agnostics being members of their community because of the rich Unitarian legacy of free inquiry and reason in matters of faith. Still others UUs subscribe to deism, pantheism, and polytheism. Many UUs reject the idea of deities and instead speak of the spirit of life that binds all life on earth. Additionally, 4 presidents of the United States were Unitarians: John Adams, John Quincy Adams, Thomas Jefferson, Millard Fillmore, and William Howard Taft. Example. This list doesn't stop there. You would be absolutely and positively amazed at the number of congressmen, senators, governors, Neville Chamberlain, the British Prime Minister, philanthropists, diplomats, Nobel Peace Prize winners, Hungarian kings, World Health Organization directors, mayors, astronauts, and all these are with S people, with an S on the end, psychiatrists, filmmakers, poets, Susan B. Anthony, Supreme Court justices, all cabinet level positions throughout the history of the United States were card-carrying Unitarians. I'm not talking 1 or 2 in each field, mind you. It's a who's who of different people that have influenced society in one way or another. Heck, the founder of the ACLU, Ragnar Nash Baldwin, is a UU. This gives a reason why they could possibly defend someone that could doodle on a piece of canvas and call it art. The inventor of the transistor and superconductor was a UU, John Bardeen. The inventor of the World Wide Web, Tim Berners-Lee, was a UU. Madeline Durham / Stanley Armour Durham / Stanley and Durham who were the grandmother, granddad, and mother of Barack Hussein Obama, were used. Ralph Waldo Emerson, newspaper/television network owner Frank Gannett, Dungeons and Dragons game designer Gary Gygax, NAACP founder Mary White Overton, the discoverer of oxygen, Joseph Priestley, etc., etc. Even a circus owner, Phineas Tyler Barnum, was influenced by demons. They are all influential. They are influential and diverse in every walk of life, yet they all have one thing in common and one common thread, and that is the spirit of reason. Seeing they believe it is cool to dabble into any occult practice just as long as they are in search for spiritual enlightenment, I can just imagine how many inventions and philosophies of life their spirit guides have given them to give to us. Did you know Sir Isaac Newton was a notorious alchemist/occultist, and if association is a window to a person's character, he was taught by demons. In fact, it says he was taught by demons. Let me explain. According to Wikipedia under Isaac Newton's occult studies, quote, the noted English scientist and mathematician wrote many works that would now be classified as occult studies. These occult works explore chronology, which is numerology, alchemy, witchcraft, and biblical interpretations, soothsaying. After purchasing and studying Newton's alchemical works in 1942, economist John Maynard Keynes, for example, penned that, quote, Newton was not the first of the age of reason, he was the last of the magicians. Newton's writings suggest that one of the main goals of his alchemy may have been the discovery, listen to how that sounds, and we will see later that they actually think that they found this stuff. They did it. But let me read that again. Listen to how it's worded. Newton's writings suggest that one of the main goals of his alchemy may have been the discovery of the Philosopher's Stone, which is a material believed to turn base metal into gold, and perhaps to a lesser extent, the discovery of the highly coveted elixir of life. Under biblical studies, quote, in a manuscript he wrote in 1704, in which he describes his attempts to extract scientific information from the Bible, Newton estimated that the world would end no earlier than 2060. Newton studied and wrote extensively upon the Temple of Solomon, dedicating an entire chapter of the chronology of ancient kingdoms to his observation regarding the temple. In addition to scripture, Newton also relied upon various ancient and contemporary sources while studying temples. He believed that many ancient sources were endowed with sacred wisdom and that the proportions of many of the temples were in themselves sacred. This belief would lead Newton to examine many architectural works of Hellenistic Greece as well as Roman sources such as Vitivinus in a search for their occult knowledge. This concept, often termed Persica Sapientia, sacred wisdom, and also ancient wisdom that was revealed to Adam and Moses directly by God, was a common belief of many scholars during Newton's lifetime. As a Bible scholar, Newton was initially interested in the sacred geometry of Solomon's temple, but he also believed that the dimensions and proportions represented more. Under Newton and the Rosicrucians, check this out. Quote, perhaps the movement which most influenced Isaac Newton was Rosicrucianism. The Rosicrucian belief in being specifically chosen for the ability to communicate with angels and spirits is echoed in Newton's prophetic beliefs. Additionally, the Rosicrucians proclaimed to have the ability to live forever through the use of the elixir vitalis and the ability to produce limitless amounts time, and gold from the use of the Philosopher's Stone, which they claim to have in their possession. During his own life, Newton was openly accused of being a Rosicrucian, as were many members of the Royal Society, the ancient and mystical order of Rosy Cross has always claimed Newton as a frater. Example: I went to great lengths and wrote all of this for many reasons. First, it is said that everything we use in the modern world can be attributed to this man. Second, there is no question this man was tutored by demon spirits in the arts of witchcraft, numerology, Bible codes, calculus. Calculus is nothing more than numerology and sacred geometry slapped together. Alchemy, his quest for riches, fame, glory, and immortality. Hey, isn't that everything that the Nakash said to them in the Garden of Eden? Yeah. The third reason hits home to me. The owner, Dr. Kell, and one of the doctors, Dr. Culver, of my second laboratory job were Rosicrucians. They had the ring with the rose and the cross and all. Dr. Culver would talk to me here and there, and what I thought at the time were very weird conversations and questions. One that will always stick in my mind was, most people believe Adolf Hitler was a bad guy, but what if he was a worker for God? I needed a job, so I continued to listen and ultimately started asking questions. The owner, Dr. Kell, would somehow and mysteriously pop up each and every time, just before we get to the juicy parts. And I mean, he would pop up each and every time as though he had that thing wired. I'm serious. But let's keep going. Now that I read this, more of what they were doing in their laboratory makes sense to me now, because it didn't make sense to any of us back then. We were just trying to keep our jobs in a market of corporate takeovers at the time. See, I worked in a methadone clinic, but on the side, we were trying to develop a formula that would make you live longer. Now I'm understanding that was his rendition of the elixir of life. Culver was a psychiatrist who talked to the recovering addicts about their feelings. Out of our many conversations, one of the burning questions I had was answered, which was, at the time, if the Masons are so evil, why do we see them do so much good in the world? Again, this was almost 20 years ago, and I was just starting out in this walk. The answer is within their doctrines of belief. They believe by them knowing the difference between good and evil and choosing to do good works, they will, get this now, be justified while standing before the great white throne of judgment. For this reason, you always see them with their all-seeing eye aprons on. This symbolizes them knowing evil and covering up their nakedness like Adam and Eve did in the Garden of Eden. The obvious problem with this doctrine is, if you find yourself standing before the Ancient of Days at the great white throne of judgment, you are already condemned to death and hell. Why? Because those who stand in that line are obviously in the second resurrection. And we all know there's no power in the second resurrection. Is it a Freudian slip in their dogma? Or do they truly know they are serving Lucifer in this life and will rebelliously plead their earthly wisdom cases before the Creator at the great white throne? But wait! To show you the tree of America was rotten, did you know the first couple of English Christians to try to settle in America were reduced to cannibals and then died off? According to the Yahoo News, under 10 European colonies in America that failed before Jamestown. Quote, the Jamestown settlement in Virginia, which officially was started on May 14, 1607, was one of the first European colonies to last in North America and was historically significant for hosting the first parliamentary assembly in America. But Jamestown barely survived. as recent headlines about the confirmation of cannibalism at the colony is confirmed. The adaptation, that's it, to the North American continent by the early Europeans was extremely problematic. Example, you see how, look, go back. Y'all see how I use that electric company, something I learned almost 40 years ago? How I just put those two words together and set it out smooth, and then y'all want to cut doggone Sesame Street's funding and electric companies funding. Man, y'all crazy. That stuff sticks with you. And conjunction, junction, man, that stuff sticks with you. But example, first, do you believe the Creator would sanction a trip for His church and have them die by Indian tax, by disease, and eating the hindquarters of humans? I bet you they ate bats, vultures, toads, skunks, and poor Fido didn't stand a chance. He thought Master wanted to go play fetch with the stick. Little did he know, he was the main ingredient for canine gruel. This is a clear indicator the tree to the America we have today was born rotten. Second, the term New World Order is oxymoron at best. How can something be new when it was already attempted 5,000 years ago with the Tower of Babel? There is nothing new about anything that's going on today. Remember when I linked the founder's allegiance to the goddess of reason and the great whore earlier? The goddess of reason manifested herself through the wife of Nimrod, who took over power and the religious cult after his death. Her name was originally Semiramis, but transformed to be named the Queen of Heaven, Isis, Esther, Ishtar, or Osiris, Isi, Anina, Sibyl, etc., to the rest of the nations. She is the many-breasted one I personally heard a colored preacher gal named Bynum profess to. Get this. Somehow, after Nimrod's death, he was then associated with the sun, and she proclaimed she was impregnated by the rays of the sun and produced a child named Tammuz. This is where the Catholics get their idea of the Trinity from: Father, Son, and Queen of Heaven. This philosophy is the foundation of just about every culture out there. India has a Trinity like this, the Greeks, the Romans, Egyptians, etc. She is talked about in the scriptures as being the spiritual leader of the most powerful nation on earth in the latter days. Her description, those who worship her in secret, and their overall destruction are littered throughout the scriptures if you have the correct perception to see them. If you are a student of biblical history, you will quickly see whatever country the Hebrew Israelites were being held captives flourished while they were there. Egypt, Babylon, Africa. But as soon as the Israelites were free from bondage, destruction to the kingdoms of bondage quickly followed. We know the Israelites are being held in bondage in Babylon because the prophecies tell us so. Jeremiah 50, 12 through 14. Quote, "Your mother shall be sore confounded. She that bare you shall be ashamed." Talking about England. "Behold," which will be the king of the first beast, or the lion, who was given the thing of the heart, the heart of a man. But let's keep going. "Behold, the hindermost, which is the newest of the nations, shall be a wilderness, a dry land, and a desert. Because of the wrath of Yah, it shall not be inhabited, but it shall be wholly desolate. Everyone that goeth by Babylon shall be astonished, and hiss at her all her plagues. Put yourselves in array against Babylon round about, all ye that bend the bow. Shoot at her, spare no arrows, for she hath sinned against Yah." Example. This passage pinpoints America as being Mystery Babylon. It's called a mystery because it was a nation not yet founded when this passage was written and read throughout the world. I don't know what wholly desolate means, but it doesn't sound like it's good at all. Surely Yah isn't talking about the actual Babylon, because the Middle East is already dry land and a desert, and there isn't enough trees there together to be considered a wilderness. This was meant to shock and awe the readers, so saying something that is already plausible and normal does not fit the flow of the storyline. Plain and simple, in a surprise preemptive strike, America will be destroyed. This passage should also put all of the revisited Roman Empire dogma to rest. Rome did not have a mother nation and is definitely not the hindermost of the nations. No, the cult of reason encompasses all other religions and cults. I know most, if not all of you, are thinking about the Illuminati. But please understand, Adam Weishaupt got the Illuminati idea from his dealings with the code of reason. In my humble opinion, I believe the infamous peace out of chaos is exactly what's going on in the Middle East today. I believe the Middle East is being prepared for reasoning to spread there, thus the kings of the earth. Question: what was the very first thing the Americans did when they invaded Iraq and Afghanistan? Answer: build schools. Under the guise of enlightenment/education, the Western nations have embraced the very abominations Yah said he hated. And the Middle East is the last target for a Western-style Renaissance period. Philosophers, art, this is why the Hito guy finally made the picture of Muhammad, to get it into the sphere. Inventions, etc. are on the horizon for the Middle East. And remember, Muhammad got that stuff out of there. They had a Renaissance period way back when, but when Muhammad came in, they cut that stuff. And you can see the mindset of the people since then. Think about this for a second. I know I shouldn't laugh at it because these devils were trying to touch people's souls. But do you know what some of the one of the torture techniques they used down in Guantanamo? It was to play rock and roll music to them. Man, those prisoners went absolutely nuts because they thought Satan was talking to them. Now, of course, I do know, I did some videos, that music is laced with this, that, and other. But for them to go nuts and crazy that way and not, for the lack of a better word, please forgive me, not like that, not reason what things were, and for that way, it's just a small indicator and it's indicative of what has to change in the Middle East. And they're definitely going to do that. Believe me, it is happening as we speak. But let's continue. This eclectic wave will be the main push behind rebuilding Babylon and giving the Elamites, which are the watered down people we now call the Kurds, their homeland. Out of the chaos of war and strife, the spark of reasoning and knowledge will spring forth as an Arab Spring. Hey, I've heard that before. What? Surely you're not against education, scribe. Most of you are saying either to yourself or out loud at this very moment, aren't you? If you are, you would be correct. And if you allow me to express my educated guess with a drizzle of wisdom, you might come to the same spiritual conclusion that I have. Let me explain. Each degree earned is another step. Think about Masons at this point. Within the cult of reason. Each university, well, we can start at high school. Each high school diploma, each university is a chapter in the cult of reason. Some specialize in specific reasoning, some only general reasoning. All indoctrinate the youth in the reason of the betterment of mankind through science, philosophy, arts, etc. The higher degrees you get, high school diploma, associates, bachelor's, masters, MBA, PhD, etc., the more knowledge you receive. The more knowledge you receive, the more technological, social, etc. advancements and perception you receive, until your reasoning leads you to believe you are your own God, with the knowledge of good and evil. Reasoning will lead people to believe eugenics is the only humane thing to do. I mean, think about it. Their philosophy makes sense if you're trying to betterment mankind. Reasoning will lead people to enslave others for the betterment of mankind. Only the strong survive makes logical sense. Reasoning will lead people to devise every wicked device their imaginations can dream. No, not because it's right or wrong, only because it can be done. Reasoning without Yah-given wisdom is the harbinger to mankind and the gift the Nakash promised Eve in the Garden of Eden. Reasoning, knowing good and evil. That's why Yah questioned them in the manner that he did. Who told you you was naked? How did you reason you were naked? See, being naked wasn't a problem. Understanding they were naked was a problem. Little known fact. Did you know it was the communist Bavarian Illuminati in 1776 that started the ideal of educating all the people and elevate the status of the youth over the elderly? Sure, you look at these things as commonplace and as a no-brainer in modern times, but this was not the case before 1776. In fact, you know what? Well, let me keep going. In fact, according to Wikipedia, under List of Presidents of the United States by Education, quote, of the first 7 presidents, 5 were college graduates. College degrees have set the presidents apart from the general population, and presidents have held such a degree even when this was quite rare and indeed unnecessary for practicing most occupations, including law. Example, yep, even honest Abe Lincoln practiced law but didn't attend college. Now law school is one of the most expensive schools to attend. I know some of you history buffs out there want to bring up Alexander the Great and his campaign to give Greek education to all the kingdoms in which he conquered. I would have to say that you are correct in the letter of what happened, but lack in the spirit of what was truly going on. The letter. Alexander gave Greek education to all the foreign people because he used it as bait to conquer the kingdoms without bloodshed, pine to the people's will, which in turn made the aboriginal king powerless and more apt to surrender. He did this even though his generals disapproved of this method because not every Greek child had a classical Greek education at the time. Spiritual. Alexander was one of the major kingdoms that had to come, influence, subdue, and trying down the earth talked about throughout the prophecies of the Bible. And trying down the earth talked about throughout the prophecies of the Bible. Though the physical man viewed Alexander and his works to betterment mankind in esteem, spiritually he was a demon king used by the holy high ones to thwart Yah's grand plan. To prove my point, immediately after Alexander's death and the division of his kingdoms to his generals, the educational program stopped. It was not until 1776 the spirit of educating all reared its ugly head again with the same spiritually deadly consequences. If we are supposed to judge the fruit by the tree that it bear, for no bad tree can bear good fruit and no good tree can bear bad fruit, all we have to do is look at the foundation, the tree, of any movement to have the heads up on the fruit it will bear. Inner stage left, John Dewey. Mr. Dewey is credited with being the founder of our modern educational system in the United States and abroad. I say we take a closer look at Mr. Dewey to see what the tree has to say about his true intentions of our educational system. What about you? According to Wikipedia under John Dewey, quote, John Dewey was an American philosopher, psychiatrist, and educational reformer whose ideas have been influential in education and social reforms. Dewey is one of the primary figures associated with philosophy of pragmatism, and is considered one of the founders of functional psychology. A well-known public intellectual, he was also a major voice of progressive education and liberalism. Although Dewey is known best for his publications concerning education, he also wrote about many other topics, including epistemology, metaphysics, logic, social theory, and ethics. Example: Mr. Dewey is also the founder of the functional psychology and a major player in the true meaning of the word liberalism too. We will get to those sections later, so don't let me forget what we have uncovered now. Okay, back to Dewey. Under humanism, quote, as an atheist and secular humanist, Dewey participated with a variety of humanistic activities from the 1930s until the 1950s, which included sitting on the advisory board of Charles Francis Potter's First Humanist Society in New York, 1929, being one of the original 34 signatories of the First Humanist Manifesto in 1933, and being elected an honorary member of the Humanist Press Association in 1936. Example: bingo! Humanism gives credence to you believing in human potential and eventually becoming your own God. The same thing the snake told Eve. Absolute right and wrong are out the window. Do what seems right to you. Mr. Dewey traveled extensively throughout Europe, China, and Turkey, formulating and refitting all of the ideologies he has gleaned. When he returned to America, he helped pen the Humanist Manifesto, which looks and sounds ever so much like Karl Marx's Communist Manifesto. Don't you find it strange? You know what? Don't you find that Daniel was told to, don't you find it strange that Daniel was told to seal up the book and knowledge increasing in the same sentence? A strange thing? Knowledge is a good thing, right? Yeah, knowledge is a good thing, but wisdom is the key. Just having knowledge without wisdom has led mankind to devise the most wicked things ever imaginable. Having knowledge without wisdom will lead a person to rely on their own logical way of living, and not the way of the Creator. Knowledge without wisdom has led the brightest minds to becoming evolutionists. Knowledge makes a person discredit a miracle with reasoning and explanations on how it was done, but not having the wisdom to know nothing is new under the sun, and it might have been the timing of the occurrence, in most cases, that made it a miracle. Knowledge has the world looking for the youth for the answers to the future, but wisdom will tell you the youth are inexperienced in life and life lessons, full of hormonal imbalances and rebellion, and are prone to mistakes. Heck, their brains aren't even functional yet. For instance, the youth knowledge will tell someone to listen to their hearts, but wisdom will tell you the heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. Who can know it? Wisdom will also tell you the affairs of the heart will supersede and compromise the integrity of the mind, convincing the mind to make sense out of nonsense. Proverbs 28:26 says, he that trusteth in his own heart is a fool, but whosoever walketh wisely, he shall be delivered. Knowledge, like in the mindset of the code of reasoning elite, will tell you Adam and Eve were being held prisoner in the Garden of Eden. It is said the Creator wanted to keep them dumb and subservient, while the Nakash was the true friend of mankind, because he gave us knowledge to control our own destiny and become like gods. While wisdom and hindsight 2020 tells us if they would have just listened to the commands of the Creator, they already had all the knowledge they would have ever needed. I just heard on the news that in the state of Georgia, college enrollment is up at an all-time high. Using the trickle-down method of knowledge, of modern knowledge, it is assumed the world will soon pull itself up by its intellectual bootstraps, and poverty with all the ills under its umbrella will quickly melt away. But I ask, what exactly are our young minds being forced to learn? It takes wisdom to know what knowledge to pursue. If you allow me to impart a little wisdom to you on this matter, you will quickly come to realize you should second guess, question, and spiritually investigate everything the world is forcing you to comply with. Yes, we are being forced to become worldly educated, believe it or not. Wisdom will tell us that if the holy high ones will deceive the whole world with the world willingly giving their power unto them, the deception has to be in a manner in which the world will take it as a positive influence on their lives. In this case, worldly education is the key to accomplishing this goal. Nothing under the sun is new. Only the names have been changed to deceive the innocent. The enemy has many different ways to lead you astray. The first being outright, allowing the rebellion deep within you to make the choices they want you to make. Most Satanists will tell you the most influential part of their doctrine is their opposition to any type of rules. Their motto is, do as thou wilt, for that is the whole of the law. And as we will see, this attitude has crept into the common youth's reality, lexicon, and fashions unaware of its true nefarious meanings. We hear it in one way or another in just about every form of media daily. All of the listen to what your heart tells you to do and just try not to hurt anyone in the process. Be all that you can be because the God is within you. You are the power of one. You can be anything you want to be. Inspirational quotes sure sounds good. Modern, and you probably just heard someone say it. But it is the most rebellious act and affront to the Creator, wrapped up in a pretty bowl of vain flattery as you can get. This line of subtle rebellion empowers you to emancipate yourself from the constraints of rules and using your own personal brand of humanity as a standard. Man, it is pure evil genius. Who doesn't want to feel like they're empowered? It's no small coincidence the rise of self-help, this, and self-awareness, that, and the decrease in social, moral, biblical standards are being affected at the exact same time. You know what? We're going to cut it there. But, man, we just starting on this thing. We're going to go through, as I see it, as the wisdom given unto me. Man, by the time your child gets out of high school, gets that little illuminated diploma, he has dabbled into the occult, hell, for 9 or 10 years. I mean, he's a little alchemist. He's a little a witchcraft wizard. He's a little soothsayer. And think about this: the jobs that we push our children or allow them to go into, when looked upon with an analytical eye, man, y'all done pushed y'all children straight to the devil. Straight to the devil. But that's what we're going to go get with next. In fact, yeah, that's we're going to start on that the very next thing. So, but I got to get something to drink. It's very difficult. I didn't know how difficult it was to actually read something with trying not to make any mistakes out loud. It's difficult. But we're going to trudge through it. As always, thank you for looking at this video, and look for the next one.